This video was brought to you by Incogni. Donald Trump says that he's considering running for a third presidential term. Now, it would be easy to dismiss this as a joke, as Trump is often prone to make. However, he says that he's not joking. It would also be easy to wave away the possibility by pointing to the US Constitution's two-term limit, but Trump and others in his orbit have openly said that they think there are ways around it. And it would be easy to see Trump's comments as simply an attempt to bait the media. But the reality is that since returning to office, Trump has not hesitated at challenging the constitutional order. So in this video, we're going to explain Trump's apparent desire for a third term, and the various ways that he might try and change, circumvent, or defy the Constitution in order to achieve it. Who's more influential, Trump or Putin? Well, we asked the TLDR team and audience to rank a bunch of the most powerful people, and we have the results. Find out the full list in the next copy of our magazine, Too Long. And you can pre-order a copy by clicking the link in the description. To start with some quick context, for more than the first century and a half of US history, the two-term limit on the presidency was not actually written into law. It was a custom established by the first president, George Washington, who opted to not run again after his second term. This set a precedent which continued until the mid-20th century, when Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected to a record 4 terms before dying in April 1945. This inspired lawmakers to write the two-term tradition into the Constitution via the 22nd Amendment, which states that no person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice. So how could Trump try to get around this barrier? Well, the most obvious and legally sound way is to amend the Constitution. In fact, this is something that one particularly eager Trump loyalist Republican congressman is currently trying to put into motion. He's proposed an amendment that states that no person shall be elected to the office of president more than 3 times, nor be elected to any additional term after being elected to 2 consecutive terms. The amendment is cleverly designed to enable Trump to run again, but would bar other living presidents, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama, from running, as they've all served consecutive terms. To change the Constitution, an amendment needs 2/3 support in both chambers of Congress, and then must be approved by at least 3/4 of all states. The chances of this happening are incredibly small. Republicans only have narrow majorities in the US Congress, control fewer than 75% of state legislatures, and Republican lawmakers, at the moment, don't even unanimously support the idea. On top of this, the timeline to push such an amendment through is pretty tight if the goal is to enable Trump to run again in 2028. So, if we think that's unlikely, what other routes might Trump take? One idea that's floating around is that he could run as the vice presidential candidate on a Republican ticket topped by an ally, like, say, J.D. Vance. If elected, President Vance could quickly resign and pass the baton to Trump, who would ascend to the presidency and serve a 3rd term. In a recent interview with NBC, Trump was asked about this idea and said, well, that's one method, but there are others too. This purported loophole relies on the fact that the 22nd Amendment says that no person shall be elected president more than twice, but does not explicitly say that they cannot serve more than twice. The problem with this idea, though, is that it rubs up against the 12th Amendment, which includes a provision that states, no person constitutionally ineligible to the office of president shall be eligible to that of the vice president of the United States. So it would seem that Trump's ineligibility for the presidency, as a result of the 22nd Amendment, would make him ineligible for the vice presidency too, because of the 12th Amendment. However, this scenario has never been tested in practice, so if Trump did go down this route, it would set the stage for a significant legal battle. Trump's team would presumably point to the elected versus serving distinction, and say that the Constitution's only requirements for presidential eligibility relate to age, citizenship, and residency, in the hope that the conservative majority Supreme Court agrees with them. On top of this, it's clear that people in Trump's orbit, like his former strategist Steve Bannon, are looking at a number of ways to get him his 3rd term. But perhaps the most extreme way that Trump could seek a 3rd term would be to forget amendments and legalistic loopholes and instead just ignore the Constitution entirely by running for a 3rd term and challenging anyone who tries to stop him. Now, this is obviously a dramatic hypothetical, and we're not suggesting that it's a likely course of events, but it is at least worth considering in this video. Not least because A, Trump tried to find ways to stay in office despite losing the 2020 election, and B, in his second term, Trump has demonstrated what Georgetown law professor Steve Vladek has called an unprecedented degree of resistance to adverse court rulings. So how might this hypothetical defiance approach actually play out? Well, for obvious reasons, it's impossible to say, but Politico's James Romoser has set out an interesting potential scenario. Imagine that as we approach the 2028 election season, Trump heads out onto the campaign trail and acts exactly as if he's a candidate with the support of a considerable chunk of the electorate and continues to dominate the Republican Party, which then pronounces him as its nominee. Romoser writes, would states refuse to put him on their ballots? Some certainly would, but that would spark litigation. The issue would then wind up at the Supreme Court, a court that's already quite sympathetic to Trump's interests, and in 4 years may be populated with even more Trump appointees than it is today. Romoser's scenario could then go in a number of different directions. The court could enable Trump's candidacy, reject it, or duck the question and leave it up to other actors, like individual states or Congress, to deal with. Now, we won't go any further into this hypothetical, and again, we aren't saying it's likely, but hopefully you get an idea of what the most dramatic scenario might look like. It also highlights an uncomfortable reality, in that the US Constitution, court rulings, and other legally established limits are ultimately just words on a page if no one is willing or able to enforce them. Before we wrap up though, it's worth reflecting on why Trump is publicly musing about a third term anyway. It might just be as simple as he wants to remain as president for as long as possible. Alternatively, he might be trying to do it to extend his political relevance and hold off potential successors from stealing the spotlight. After all, in normal circumstances, a second-term president who'll be 82 by the time they leave office would be seen as the lamest of ducks. But it might also be in part a recognition of the fact that post-Trump, it's not clear where the Republican Party goes from here. It's hard to see another candidate who could hold together Trump's impressively diverse electoral coalition, and Trump's musings might be symptomatic of the fact that he's aware of this problem. Now, as we've demonstrated in this video, there's a huge amount of uncertainty in the world about politics and current affairs, often with few easy solutions. Unfortunately, this can be the case online too. There are all kinds of bad actors out there that want to try and use you to make a quick buck. Take, for instance, data brokers. They sell your data to businesses and marketing agencies, leading to more spam calls, texts, and emails. Or even worse, they can sell your data to even worse actors who can go on to use your identity. Some data brokers have even been charged with conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud for internationally supplying data lists of elderly and vulnerable people to scammers. Fortunately, today's sponsor Incogni can help to rectify this. They work on your behalf to request your personal data removal. They also deal with any objections, and to make sure that your personal information isn't just shared by the brokers again, they conduct repeated removal requests. And with their family and friends plan, they'll even do this for you and up to 3 of, well, your friends and family. So create an account with our link in the description, grant Incogni the ability to work on your behalf, and sit back as they make you safer. Plus, if you use our link, you'll get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan. So thanks for checking it out, and thanks to Incogni for sponsoring this video.